Hello everyone. I'm so happy to see you again on my channel. Today, I will continue to bring you a deeply emotional story about the life of the single mother Lythieuca, a woman of strength and resilience, yet carrying many hidden sorrows. Join me in watching this video to the end to experience the latest developments in her journey, a path filled with tears, but also overflowing with love. After finishing the handover of all the case files at his office, Hung hurried to catch the early bus back to his hometown. The vehicle swayed along the bumpy, familiar roads, passing by the bamboo groves at the village gate, rustling in the wind. In the distance, the rice fields were in harvest season, the fragrance of ripened grain filling the air, blending with the smoky scent of freshly burned straw. The rustic aroma stirred something deep inside Hung's heart. It had been so long since he last breathed in that familiar scent, so long since he had the chance to realize, out there, someone was waiting for him with all the love in the world. The bus stopped at the village entrance. As soon as Hung stepped down and walked a few paces, Tony's cheerful voice rang out. "Daddy! You're home!" The little boy ran toward him, arms stretched wide in delight. From the lane, Hoai also appeared, carrying a basket of freshly picked greens. Her hair was neatly tied back, her forehead glistening with beads of sweat. The moment she saw her husband, her eyes sparkled with joy, and her smile seemed to wash away the weariness of an entire day. That morning, the three of them went together to the grapefruit orchard. Golden sunlight spread across the path, filtering through the leaves, scattering down in glittering patches as if the earth had been gilded. Tony skipped ahead, laughing gleefully, his tiny feet pressing on the grass still damp with dew. Every so often, he turned his head back and called out, "Daddy, Mommy, hurry up." Hung walked behind, his calloused hands gently pulling down a heavy branch, picking a ripe fruit and placing it into the basket Hoai was holding. She smiled at him, a tender smile that seemed to erase every hardship they had endured. The laughter of the three echoed across the orchard, mingling with the chirping of sparrows above, painting a radiant and tranquil portrait of rural life. By dusk, the small kitchen of Mother Ha glowed with firelight. She busied herself preparing dinner, a steaming pot of mixed vegetable soup, a dish of braised fish rich with the smoky scent of wood fire, and a small bowl of chili fish sauce set at the center. Though simple, the food became extraordinarily delicious once the family gathered around. Tony chattered as he ate, telling stories from the market, from a loud quarrel between a shopkeeper and a customer, to a mischievous puppy knocking over a basket of greens. Trivial tales, yet in the innocent voice of a child, they became vivid and lively, drawing laughter from Mother Ha, while Hoai listened with a gentle smile, slipping another piece of fish into her husband's bowl. Hung said little, only nodding and smiling now and then, his eyes quietly moving across the table, lingering on each beloved face, his heart swelling with a warmth beyond words. Night fell, and the village sank into silence. Only the bright moon hung high above, showering the grapefruit orchard with a silver veil that made each leaf and fruit shimmer as though coated with dew. On the porch, Hung and Hoai sat side by side, the stillness so deep they could hear crickets chirping in the grass. Hung reached out his calloused hand, finding hers and holding it tightly. He gazed toward the orchard, his voice low and thick with emotion. "As long as it's like this, every struggle is worth it." Hoai turned to him, her eyes glistening under the moonlight. She said nothing, only rested her head gently on his shoulder. In that moment it was as if their hearts beat in unison, sharing the same breath, the same quiet belief, that peace had truly returned, even if storms might still be lurking beyond the horizon. On the third morning, when the whole village was still veiled in a thin mist, Hung awoke. He sat on the familiar bamboo bed, quietly folding his clothes neatly into a worn backpack. Inside the small house, the wind whistled through the tiled roof, mingling with the distant chorus of crowing roosters. Outside, the sky was still dim, just bright enough to cast his shadow across the cold earth floor. On the table, Mother Ha had already prepared a few packets of green tea and some dried cakes, carefully wrapped in old newspaper. She knew he was leaving, and there wasn't much she could give him except these simple things, heavy with affection. Stepping closer, her wrinkled hand gently placed the bundle into his pack, her voice low. "Take this with you, it'll keep you full." The road is long, don't skip your meals. Hung nodded, saying nothing, only bowing his head in thanks, afraid that if he spoke more, the heaviness of parting would break loose. When he stepped out into the yard, Hoai walked silently by his side. Her eyes were rimmed red from lack of sleep, yet her lips forced a fragile smile. Soil still clung faintly to her hands from the basket of vegetables she had just cut in the garden. Her warm palm clutched at the hem of his shirt, as if trying to hold him back. She dared not say much, afraid that even a single word would unleash the tears she fought to contain. Little Tony ran ahead, his tiny feet pressing into the wet morning dew. Seeing his father step out with the backpack slung over his shoulder, the boy rushed back and clung tightly to his hand, his voice trembling with innocence. "Daddy, stay with me one more day, please don't go." The words stopped Hung in his tracks. He bent down, holding his son close, feeling the small, trembling warmth in his arms. His heart twisted in pain, yet his determined eyes still shone with resolve. His calloused hand gently stroked the boy's soft hair. "Be brave, my son. Daddy goes to work so that one day you'll have more joy. I'll be back soon, don't cry." At the gate, the air grew heavier still. Hoai slowed her steps, her eyes fixed on the figure of her husband, burdened with his heavy pack. Tony clung to his father's hand, refusing to let go. His little fingers gripped so tightly that Hung had to bend down again, holding him once more. He kissed the boy's hair, then slowly pried each tiny finger loose. Tony sobbed and broke into tears, his red eyes following his father's fading figure. Mother Ha stood leaning against the porch post, her frail frame silhouetted in the pale dawn light. She said nothing, only watched in silence. In her eyes was both quiet worry and steadfast faith. She knew Hung's path was still unfinished, yet she also knew he could never turn away from his duty. The familiar village road lay beneath arching bamboo, the drooping leaves brushing gently against his shoulders. Each step he took pressed into the damp red earth, leaving clear footprints behind. His silhouette slowly receded, dissolving into the misty morning, until it became no more than a faint dot at the far end of the lane. The small courtyard seemed emptier than ever. Yet in the hearts of all who remained, Mother Ha, Hoai, and little Tony, there was a shared belief. Though longing clung to them, though the farewell cut deep into their souls, the day of reunion was not far away. That belief became the thread holding them steady, giving them strength to endure the wait. During the days when Hung had returned to his post at the office, life in the countryside seemed to slow back into its familiar rhythm. In the mornings, when the first rays of sunlight were still shyly hiding behind the mountains and a thin veil of mist lingered over the grapefruit leaves, Hoai and Mother Ha were already out in the garden. Both wore conical hats, trousers rolled high to their knees, one carrying a sickle, the other a basket. They waded through the furrows, carefully pulling up weeds, occasionally trimming young branches so the trees could breathe. Sweat rolled down their foreheads, but they didn't mind, working while chatting lightly about the harvest, the prices at the market, or neighborhood gossip. Those simple conversations, mingling with the rustling leaves and the heady fragrance of grapefruit blossoms, became an invisible thread that bound two generations together, steady and tender. Tony, of course, couldn't sit still like the adults. The boy ran across the yard, his tiny feet pattering on the dew-soaked earth, laughing gleefully as he went. Sometimes he bent down to pick up a fallen yellow leaf, holding it high like a treasure before running to show his mother. Other times, he would clamber onto the low wooden step, then leap down as if it were a great triumph, filling the garden with his pure laughter. His giggles blended with the distant crowing of roosters, the bark of a dog down the lane, and the creak of shoulder poles carried by early marketgoers passing by. Together, they formed a lively, yet peaceful, symphony of village life. Every time Mother Ha lifted her head and saw her grandson, her face lit up with a gentle smile. Eyes clouded by years seemed to brighten as she watched Tony scamper about. She whispered softly to Hoai, her voice as light as the breeze. "With a child in the house, the whole yard feels brighter. No matter the hardship, it's worth it, my dear." Hoai smiled and nodded in agreement, yet in her gaze lingered a distant melancholy. She looked toward the green rows of grapefruit trees, where the young fruits swelled day by day, and a quiet emptiness stirred in her chest. The house still rang with laughter, her mother's hands still tended every corner, but Hung's absence left a void nothing could quite fill. She missed his figure carrying the basket through the orchard, his playful wink whenever Tony pouted, the quiet evenings when they sat side by side on the porch sipping tea. That longing was both gentle and aching, tightening her heart whenever it rose to the surface. In the afternoon, when the sunlight turned golden and slanted through the canopy, Hoai sat at the porch weaving a broken basket with her deft hands. The dry bamboo strips clicked rhythmically, blending with the sound of Tony's eager footsteps running circles around the yard. The boy hummed a nursery rhyme he had picked up somewhere, his words lisping and jumbled but so exuberant that it made Grandmother Ha laugh out loud. Meanwhile, Mother Ha slowly set a kettle on the stove, dropping in a handful of green tea leaves. Steam curled upward, carrying the earthy scent of tea, filling the small kitchen. The aroma mingled with wood smoke and the sweet perfume of grapefruit blossoms outside, creating that distinctive fragrance of the old countryside, rich, humble, unforgettable. To an outsider, the scene seemed to speak of calm, as though all storms had long passed. Yet deep within Hoai's heart, her longing for Hung remained whole. She missed his voice, his gait, even the way he leaned against the porch post when weary. That absence sometimes left her lost in thought, her hands stilled mid-task, followed by a soft sigh. But then, her eyes would soften again as she watched Tony laughing bright and free in the yard. Even without Hung, the love within this little home was the flame that kept her strong, helping her move forward, day by day. At dawn, the village market was already bustling, long before the roosters finished crowing. The dirt road leading into the market echoed with footsteps, the creak of shoulder poles, and the crunch of wooden cartwheels rolling over the damp earth. Vegetable sellers called out their prices, the clinking of street vendors' trays mingled with haggling voices and bursts of laughter, together forming a chaotic yet familiar melody of rural life. Right at the slope near the market gate, under the shade of an old almond tree, stood a small tea house built from worn planks and a thatched roof. For generations, it had been a familiar stop for market-goers. Some dropped by for a hot cup of tea, others for a quick smoke to warm their bellies before a long day of selling. But lately, that humble tea house had a new, peculiar customer, one who drew the market's attention. A tall, thin man, his skin weathered by the sun as though he had wandered many places. His face was gaunt, his eyes deep yet unfamiliar. No one in the village knew him. He often sat quietly in the corner near the tree trunk, holding a cup of tea that went cold in his hand. He rarely drank, only raised it to his lips now and then, while his gaze roamed around, as if waiting for something. At first, people assumed he was just a passerby stopping for rest. But then twice, thrice, then 5, 6 times, always the same spot, the same cold tea, the same detached posture. Before long, his repeated presence stirred whispers among the villagers. The man spoke with a calm, steady voice, starting conversations as if casually. "This year's grapefruit harvest is good, isn't it? Have the rice fields out there been reaped yet? Anything new in this market lately?" To most, his words seemed harmless small talk. Yet tucked within those idle questions, he would often circle back, probing carefully. "Oh, by the way, isn't there a man named Hung here, a policeman? I heard he's from this village. How's he doing now?" Each time he asked, his lips curled into a faint, almost mocking smile, his eyes sharp, as though testing the listener's reaction. That very manner made the townsfolk uneasy. At first, some answered naively, but after a few repetitions, they began to find it strange. The story of the mysterious man spread quickly, first from the tea house at the slope, then to the vegetable stalls, the fish sellers, the dry goods shop. Within just a few mornings, the entire market was buzzing with speculation. One sweltering noon, when Hoai stopped by to buy a bundle of morning glory for soup, the vegetable seller leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Listen, lately there's been a strange man hanging around the tea house at the market gate. He keeps asking about your husband. Not sure if he's an old acquaintance, or something else." Hoai's heart skipped a beat. The smile faded from her lips, her hand gripping the basket tighter, veins showing beneath her skin. A chill of unease seeped into her chest, weighing her steps as she headed home. From the courtyard, Tony's laughter still rang brightly, but inside her heart, an ominous cloud gathered, blotting out the sky. Hung had only just been home a few days ago, and now someone was asking questions about him. Was it nothing more than coincidence, or a sign of looming trouble yet to come? That morning, the grapefruit orchard lay under a veil of thin white mist. The sun's rays had yet to pierce fully through the canopy, leaving only faint glimmers of pale gold on the dewdrops clinging to the leaves. The green, plump fruits glistened in the damp branches, exuding their raw, tangy scent. Out of habit, Hoai put on her worn brown blouse and carried a bamboo basket into the orchard, intending to check the trees and pick some vegetables for breakfast. But the moment she stepped into the outer row, she froze. A chilling sight met her eyes. Several young branches had been cut clean through. The cuts were sharp, straight, sap still oozing milky white, dripping onto the earth below. The pungent odor of fresh sap mixed with the acrid scent of freshly severed leaves, stinging the nose. On the ground, green leaves, still wet with dew, were scattered around the base of the trees, as if they had fallen only last night. This was no accident. Someone had come here deliberately to destroy. Hoai's body went cold, her breath catching in her chest. She stepped back instinctively, clutching the hem of her blouse tight in her fists. In that instant, the familiar sounds of morning, the chirping of birds, the rustle of the wind through the leaves, seemed distant and muffled, as though blocked by an invisible wall. Her heart pounded heavily, echoing in her head, an ominous warning. A question throbbed, relentless. Who had trespassed into their orchard? And what did they want? The thought haunted her all day. No matter how she tried to keep working, the image of the severed branches lingered in her mind. By nightfall, unease had seeped deep into the wooden house, clinging to every corner. At dinner, the family was unusually quiet. The clink of chopsticks against bowls, the sound of ladles dipping into soup, every noise seemed louder than the muted, unspoken sighs. The dim oil lamp cast trembling shadows on the wooden wall, thickening the cramped space with tension. After the meal, while Hoai and Mother Ha were tidying up, Tony toddled out to the front gate to play in the dirt. A moment later, his clear little voice rang out. "Mommy, look! I found this paper." Hoai hurried over, taking a crumpled note from his tiny hands. The edges were smeared with soil. Her heart raced as she unfolded it. By the flickering light of the oil lamp, rough scrawled letters appeared. "Some things are better left alone." The paper trembled in her grip, so thin it seemed it might tear at any moment. Her hands went cold, shivers coursing through her body. Darkness clouded her vision as her knees gave way onto the bamboo chair. Thoughts collided chaotically in her mind. Who wrote this? What did it mean? Was it about Hung? The air inside the house thickened, heavy as stone. Only the sound of crickets outside the porch and the faint hiss of wine through the wooden slats broke the silence. Little Tony, too young to sense the weight of the moment, fiddled with a wooden button in his shirt, humming a nursery rhyme. But Hoai clutched him tightly, her voice breaking, her eyes brimming with tears. Beside her, Mother Ha sat still, her aged face drawn tight with worry. She said nothing, only stared into the trembling flame of the oil lamp, her hollow eyes glinting with both fear and thought. The deep lines etched into her skin seemed to carve even deeper under the burden of another unspoken worry. No words of comfort, no explanation, just a silence so suffocating it pressed down on every chest. One thing was undeniable, the fragile peace they had known was shattered, and a creeping darkness was beginning to gather over their small home. In the office, the fluorescent lights glared cold and white, casting their brightness over stacks of thick files scattered across desks. The room was hushed, broken only by the rustle of paper, the clatter of keyboards, the scrape of pens marking red lines across reports, and the occasional cough from someone deep in work. The atmosphere was heavy, tense, as though each person carried an invisible burden pressing down on their shoulders. Hung sat quietly at his desk near the window, his eyes fixed on the report he had just finished handing over. But in truth, his mind was far from the words on the page. It was still lingering in the early morning orchard, wrapped in mist, the sound of Tony's cheerful call, "Daddy," the gentle smile of Hoai under golden sunlight breaking through the leaves. Those images, fragile pieces of peace, clashed with the starkness of files and ink, leaving his heart both warmed and aching. The door creaked open. Comrade Min, his longtime friend and fellow officer, stepped in. Normally, Min carried an easy smile, but today his face was drawn tight, his eyes shadowed with worry. He walked straight to Hung's desk, placed down a thick file, pulled a chair close, and spoke in a low voice, as if the walls themselves might have ears. "Hung, news just came in. The smuggling ring you helped bring down, it's resurfaced. Our surveillance shows the same patterns. In fact, there's a high chance they're seeking revenge." The words cut through the air like a knife. Hung froze. His hand clenched on the desk, knuckles whitening. A deep furrow etched across his brow, his eyes darkening with tension. In an instant, recent events linked together like the pieces of a chain: the strange man loitering at the market, the grapefruit branches cut clean with sap still dripping, the anonymous note with its veiled threat. None of it was coincidence. They were warnings, deliberate provocations, aimed not just at him, but at his family back home. He sat motionless, his heartbeat pounding hard and fast. A surge of heat and cold battled in his chest, like fire and ice colliding. He knew the nature of smugglers: once wounded, they never let go. If they had truly returned, the intimidation was only the beginning. That meant Hoai, Mother Ha, and little Tony were already in their sights, though they had nothing to do with this perilous world. Hung drew in a deep breath, swallowing his anger and fear, forcing it down into the pit of his chest. Raising his head, he locked eyes with Min. His voice came out rough, but his gaze burned like fire. "I understand now. What's happening in my village these past days, it isn't by chance. They've already begun to move." The office fell into a suffocating silence. Only the tick-tock of the clock echoed in the room, steady, relentless, almost deafening. And Hung knew with absolute clarity, those brief days of peace back home were nothing but a fragile pause, before the storm came crashing down, ready to drag him and his family into an unforgiving whirlpool. The peaceful days in the countryside seemed as though they would last forever. But could that fragile pause truly shield Hoai, Tony, and Mother Ha? Or was it nothing more than a thin veil of mist before the storm comes crashing down? As the signs of danger grow clearer, the shadow of threat has begun to creep into every corner of their little home. Now, the very haven that Hung has devoted his life to protecting stands at the edge of its greatest trial. Will they be able to hold on to that simple happiness? Or are these troubles only the beginning, leaving behind a chain of perils directly threatening the family's peace? Stay tuned for the next episode, and witness the tense and deeply emotional events that lie ahead.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Rất vui vì có thể gặp lại mọi người trong video hôm nay, và mình tên là Quỳnh. Mong rằng vẫn có thể gặp lại mọi người trong những video sau. Mọi người có biết không, mỗi video thì là một câu chuyện, là cả một quá trình tâm huyết, và mình cũng phải dành thời gian rất là nhiều để có thể nghiên cứu nội dung cũng như là edit video ra. Thì mình hy vọng rằng những video mà mình mang tới có thể góp phần mang lại niềm vui cho mọi người, và có thể giúp cho mọi người thư giãn, cũng như là có thể là giúp cho mọi người đi ngủ có thứ thoải mái hơn sau một ngày làm việc mệt mỏi. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ yêu quý kênh mình nhiều hơn và có thể góp ý cho kênh mình nhiều hơn nữa, để mình có thể đem đến những video hay và ý nghĩa hơn nữa. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Bye bye. Và hẹn gặp lại nhé.